You've been quite a sport.
Pleasure's mine.
Is today a busy day, Brian?
Actually, I cleared my first half so that we
Okay.
can get this done. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you so
pleasure.
much. Okay.
Let me know when you're live.
Yeah, done. So, hi everyone, welcome to the Finance Story Career Insight series, where we bring you industry leaders to share market trends, learnings, and what to expect, from what's happening in the market and industry. So, it's 2024, and many of us are curious to know, what opportunities one can expect this year, and how are the hiring trends taking shape. To help you get a closer look, we are hosting a series of conversations with top recruiters, and all of them today, actually. And our first guest for today is Brian. Brian is an executive director search practice at ABC Consultants. He has close to 20 years of experience recruiting for senior executives, including board of directors, MD, CFOs, CIOs, CHROs, you name it, and across MNCs, Indian family businesses, VC, and private equity backed portfolio companies. So, Brian, thanks a ton for joining in. Thanks for taking out the time and being here.
Thanks for having me, Chantal.
Thank you. So Brian, the first question that I have for you is, can you tell us how did you get into executive recruitment and and if you could give us a brief about ABC Consultants, a little bit about its background too.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and this is my 20th year in executive search. I actually studied to become an engineer and take over my father's business, but by accident, I got into this industry in 2004. And since then, there has been no turning back. Almost half of my career has been at ABC Consultants. And out here, I get the opportunity to work with not only multinationals, but also with reputed Indian business houses. ABC has been proudly shaping the future of these multinationals and Indian business houses for more than 50 years. We are a team of around 150 consultants spanning
Awesome.
21 industry verticals, and we bring an empathetic perspective and entrepreneurial spirit to every client engagement that we have. Um, I think nobody understands Indians better than we do, and that's reason we are always at the forefront solving business problems for our Indian clients or any multinational looking at entering India in that context.
That's amazing. And everyone who's watching and joined us, please type in your questions. We'll take up questions ASAP. And yeah, Brian, can you tell me exactly what's your current profile? Like, what industry do you specialize in, and what roles do you specialize in broadly?
Sure. By and large, I specialize in CXO level hiring. Most of my businesses that I kind of support the board, work with the private equity or the promoter per se, is when they're trying to solve a business problem and we are trying to align talent to solve that business problem. I only work on a retainer based search model. And essentially, the search is extremely deep and extremely comprehensive. And we really take pride to see that most of our candidates who we placed has still been in the organization, in many cases for more than a decade. And that results in repeat business for us at ABC, which is almost 75% of existing revenues.
That's excellent. Cool. So, everyone's curious to know, how does the hiring and headhunting process for the CXOs unfold? Like, what's the initial process of looking out for a candidate, till the candidate actually joins the organizations? How do you network? connect with them, communicate the job opportunities? Do you have like a portfolio of clients? How does it work?
Sure. I think by and large, as a rating search consultant, my job is to solve a business problem. And when I'm looking at a landscape, that is be the company landscape or the candidate landscape, we use systematic research by which we are aligning the company and the candidate to the culture of the firm, to the business objectives of the firm, and the financial objectives of the firm. We also exploit the rich relationships that we have internally as an organization and the networks we built as individuals for decades with our candidate community as well. Now, needless to say, the knowledge that we have in our sectors, basically our ideas stem from them, and we are be able to put more value to the table than looking at it as a transaction. And basically, what we do is look at a collaborative approach internally when we are trying to solve roles, especially in finance, because finance today is a fungible function. You don't necessarily need specific industry experience. So together we collaborate and we try to solve business problems for our clients by bringing the best talent available.
Okay, so if you have to give me a practical instance, of from start to finish. Okay, so if
Sure,
I'm an organization and I'm looking, say, for a CFO or a CIO, right? So how does a company approach you? How do you understand the job profile? Then how do you map it out to relevant candidates? How does your research team exactly work? Is it from the existing pool, and how long does it take? And what does the board look for, right, from you and the candidates, and how do you balance the entire process, because they're such
sure.
important decision makers, right? So it's a lengthy
Right.
process. Yeah.
Correct. Absolutely. You actually hit the nail on the head. It's a lengthy process, and you really can't go wrong when you're hiring a CXO or a CFO for that matter. I think at a fundamental level, we have to identify the best in class when we are putting up that long list to the board. And from that, where they decide to shortlist certain candidates that they would want ABC to engage with. So that's called the shortlisting process when you're working with different boards. Once the candidates are shortlisted based on extensive research and networks, etc., we approach the candidates. And by and large, when it comes to approaching these candidates, it's very important you articulate the nuances of the position, and we don't dilute this positioning on behalf of the client by delegating this responsibility to somebody junior in the team. Senior consultants like me take on this conversation, and we basically speak at length with the individual, ideally face to face in many cases. In some cases, if it's a different city altogether, it's initially through a virtual meeting, speaking about the vision, mission, and also talking about the runway for the role once the person comes on board. Some points which I'll take up later in the conversation is how these roles translate to becoming the CEO of the firm. So, broadly, again, coming back, we look at approaching the candidate and positioning the company, positioning the assignment in a very strong way. After that's done, we look at assessing the candidates. When you're looking at assessing the candidates, we follow a competency based interviewing model. We basically break that down into a very simple format of hard skills, soft skills, and culture fitment. And based on the assessments that we do on behalf of a client, we put a stacked ranking order where the candidate slots in and what does he bring to the table. Once after a comprehensive exercise of looking at the market, looking across different industries, we come to a final shortlist of three candidates, and then the board or the CEO has to decide which candidates you want to go through. We go ahead and do a diligent reference check process to ensure there are no skeletons in the closet, and the feedback is very positive. And then we take it to closure where we negotiate the compensation on behalf of the client, and we take it to closure. Our job doesn't stop there, Chantel. Once the candidate is offered and he's going through a separation process, our job is also to handhold that candidate to ensure the transition is smooth from his organization that is leaving to the new organization that is joining. And once he comes in, he settles down. Whatever was ensured and promised during the selection process, those points are met, and there are no shortcomings after he's taken up the role. So I think once the transition has been smooth into the newer organization and he's hit the ground running and he's been able to deliver, that actually helps us to get repeat business, and we take a lot of pride to see our candidates being successes in different organizations. So broadly, this is the process and how it concludes in terms of a successful hire.
Okay, and what is the biggest challenges you face, in this process as a senior search recruiter, right? It could be on the client side and it could be on the candidate side because the candidates are CXOs, they're earning well, they're doing well. They don't want to make a mistake again moving to another organization, right? If you're a middle level, if you're like, say, going for a senior director, you're okay to, it's fine. But if you're taking up a CFO role, a CHRO role, a CI, you want to be correct yourself. So, what are the challenges you have to deal with, or situations?
Right. I think in today's day and age, people are very mindful in terms of what's the role that they are going to take up, what are the sacrifices they need to make, what is going to be the work-life balance that they get, and in terms of what is going to be the benefit or reward that they would get depending on where they steer the organization and what are the milestones that they achieve. I think the biggest challenge that I face today is essentially to convert a very passive candidate. And I think the most important thing aspect is out here is when I relate to him the vision and mission of the board and the organization, and what is it going to take for him to identify with those missions and goals and then align it with what mission and vision he has as an individual. If that alignment gets right, I think 90% of the battle gets won. Automatically, then there's identity with the organization. He's willing to put in those hours or make those sacrifices depending on the nature of business. And I think another important aspect is relocation. In many cases, candidates today are mindful of not to disturb the ecosystem that they have built for so many years. But many a times, I think when we show the broader picture, many times the candidates take that plunge and they relocate as well. So these are the challenges broadly when I talk about converting passive candidates, and relocation is one of the biggest obstacles. As far as the client side is concerned, there are many biases that the clients have when it comes to hiring. I think traditionally, when we hire, we used to hire for education and industry experience. Now, that paradigm has changed significantly. We've seen two black swan events in the last decade, and we did not know how to basically prepare for these black swan events. So, people who had the potential to navigate through these problems and challenges are the ones who did well. So, people who are able to adapt quickly, they are nimble on their feet, they bring a lot of agility, and they are able to basically translate that into business results are the ones who basically do extremely well.
Okay, that's excellent. If I'm a CXO, if I want to, okay, I'm not a CXO, maybe I'm one level below and I want to be in that, on the table, right? So how do I spotlight myself to be, to so that Brian approaches me? What do I do? That's one. Or his team approaches me. That's one. Is being active on LinkedIn very important? Is proactively, writing to search firms is really important. That's one. And also earlier, if you compare, say, the last 2 to 3 years, okay. And you make blogs, say the last 2 to 3 years, and prior to that, prior to COVID, okay, how are CXOs looking at the organization that they are in? Are they looking at joining startups? Are they looking at frequent moves? What is it that they are looking at? How often do they move and change roles?
Sure, that's a great question, Chantal. I'll take a step back for a moment before I answer that. CFO hiring has changed drastically in the last 20 years. Today, when I look at CFOs, it's more strategic than operational in nature. By and large, today when I'm hiring for CFOs, the important point that I need to make sure is that does he have the ability to navigate from running operations, which is 5 feet above the ground, to drive strategy, blue sky thinking, build versus buy, which is almost 50,000 feet above the ground. So I think that's one important attribute that I'm looking at an individual. Something which will not replace at any given point of time is how do you measure yourself every year on skills and knowledge and the competencies that you build year on year? How much do you invest in yourself? Do you have your ears to the ground and you're keeping a tab what competition is doing, what the market is doing, where is it heading? Are you keeping a tab in terms of what your peer level firms are doing if you're deciding to be in a certain industry? And how are you ahead of the curve in terms of the maturity of your business? How do you help navigate those complexities that your businesses go through? I think by and large in today's data driven world, it's all about how curious you are, how insightful you can be. How do you measure yourself with knowledge, and how what are the skills that you build? I think these are the fundamentals of catapulting yourself from where you are to the next level.
Okay, okay, that's one part. And how have you seen, what are the trends, the way CXOs behave? Like, how long are they looking at a particular, to be in a particular organization, and how often are they looking at moving? And also, if you could highlight, what are they looking for? We've spoken so much about Gen Zs wanting work-life balance, wanting freedom, wanting to be nurtured, and of course, wanting money. What are CXOs looking at? And and what is it that you all look for? Okay, because now talent, managing talent is also so important for the CXOs. Like, how how do you look at the entire flow?
That's great. So Chantal, I think the first thing that we start with is to look at the motivation of the candidate, of the CFO, and align it with the company. Is he motivated to look at a role with an organization only because of compensation, because he wants to catch up with his peers or batchmates from college, his alumni? Or is he actually willing to put in those hours, making those sacrifices, what the job entails to do? Has he reconciled his experiences, and is he prepared for the next level? That's the first thing that we start with. Additionally, we basically look at how does he identify himself with the organization? Is he culturally aligned with the firm? Does he understand what's it going to take to build this firm and take it to the next level? Does he have the right people skills? Is he a person who comes with the traditional command and control approach, or is he a person who inspires, leads, and motivates his team? I think these are some of the important points that we keep in mind. Um, I think I missed a part of your question. If you could repeat that
How
for me.
often do CXOs change, are looking at changing their profile, and how
Okay,
often?
thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. I think it's all about purpose in today's day. It's no longer BAU. The needles are moving every year. It's all about how sustainable are you going to be in the near future, and what is the value you're bringing to the table. So I think if your organization is not in a BAU mode, you're continuously giving value back to the board, to your stakeholders, to your investors. I think you will see a meaningful journey with the organization, and your journey is not going to be probably stagnant. It's going to be eventful, and it's going to be progressive.
Okay, okay, that's amazing. We have this question from Ruchi. She says, "Thanks, Brian. How do you get passive CXO candidates to the discussion table if they have said no, yet client insists on meeting them?"
Okay, I think that's a good question, Ruchi. Thank you for the question. I think the most important point when we are looking at converting a passive candidate is to get into the details of what has led him to be successful in his present organization. As an advisor, I always make it a point to advise my candidates what's in the offering in terms of the runway of the role once you come on board. Now, if for example, I'm a 45-year-old CFO and I'm getting an opportunity through a headhunter, where is that going to take me directionally? Is that going to make me a global CFO with the current organization? Do I get to then get into a specialist role? Or do I look at progressing into a business head role eventually, like a COO, running multiple businesses or a single business? Or does it help me to navigate and stir the organization as a CEO eventually? I think that objective is very clear to get it articulated by the client, depending on what are the objectives that the candidate meets, and put that forward very clearly. And if there are case studies where the client has already had successes like that in the past, putting forward those successes to that candidate. Now, obviously, there would be some resistance by the candidate by just taking it at face value. So, I think what we do is we set up a no obligation exploratory discussion. Let the minds meet, and if the minds have met well and they kind of have comfort, then we cross the first bridge.
Okay, that's amazing. We have another question from Rahul. I don't know why the image is not showing clearly, but Rahul says, uh, "How is the head of finance of early startups perceived when it comes to hiring, as a CFO of an established organization?"
Great. Thank you, Rahul, for that question. When you look at a startup, I think you're trying to basically solve a business problem which is relevant to the community. It could be in a B2C model or it could be in a B2B model. Versus a traditional CFO is basically working in a well-oiled systemic engine, which is having progressive growth year on year. A startup basically at any given point of time needs to keep planning and ready, being ready for the future. So I think staying relevant is extremely critical for the startup given the challenges that they operate in. And a CFO in that environment needs to be extremely hands-on in terms of insights, curiosity, in terms of running the show. And I think if I have to put a ratio in terms of strategy versus operation, it's a good blend of 40% strategy and 60% operations if I'm looking at a CFO for a startup. If I look at a mid-sized or large organization, it can vary depending on the nature of business. But by and large, in a large organization or mid-sized organization, the ratios are inversely proportional. 60% strategy and 40% is more operations.
Okay, cool. So if Rahul, say for instance, he's a head of finance at an early stage startup, you can consider him for a CFO of an established organization if he's able to bring whatever is required in today's age and date, right? So that's fine.
Right. I think that's a good question. If Rahul checks all the boxes on behavioral competencies, if he has the right culture fit, and I clearly see the needle moving in terms of hiring young CFOs today in their late 30s or early 40s, I think Rahul has a great opportunity to become the next CFO for a reputed enterprise client or a startup.
Okay, so why do you say if you're a young CFO, the needle is moving and companies are looking at young CFOs? Like, why do you say that? Earlier, it wasn't the case, right? It was more about experience, experience, experience. So
Sure.
yeah.
If you look at our journey from the 90s to the 2000s, and if you see the rate at which organizations would grow, either it would be late single digits or early double digits. Today, if you look at from 2014 onwards, the way organizations are growing, it's in multiple times 4x, 5x, 10x, etc. to where is it today. Now, when you're running such business models, it's extremely important that the person at um, the helm of affairs, the person who's heading that function, needs to be having high levels of energy. He needs to be nimble. He needs to have those right behavioral traits that will bring their agility to the function and to the business. And many a times, in my personal opinion, and I'm not trying to be biased here, I'm just trying to say that I've seen it more relevant in the early 40s, mid 40s, than somebody towards their superannuation age.
Okay, okay, cool. That's well answered. We have this question from Hardik. Hardik says, "Is there any particular course, like say maybe an SPJ and MBA, that you suggest for those looking to transition to CFOs? Do courses help? In short,
I think I'll go back to Shantal's earlier question, which is left a little unanswered, and I'll answer this question as well. Thank you so much for the question, though. Um, I think in the previous era, that's 20 years back, I think at that point in time, we were confined to regulators like stock markets and basically the board. Today, the biggest regulator is social media. And I think it's extremely important that you have a strong brand presence, and that brand presence is extremely critical in terms of also the knowledge that you bring to the table. So if you are investing in yourself by doing the relevant MBAs or courses, irrespective of it's a foreign university or an Indian university, and that's translating into knowledge, acumen, and business results in the organizations that you're working. And at the same time, you're also a part of various pro bono initiatives or industrial forums where you're demonstrating the expertise that you have built. That's a very strong positioning for you in the market. So I think it's a combination of both education, knowledge, insights, and brand positioning of yourself.
spotlighting yourself and brand positioning is really important. So you encourage CXOs, CFOs to be on platforms like LinkedIn and to engage a lot more, because earlier none of them were on any social media platforms, but off late everyone's very actively involved. So I guess that could be one reason as well.
I think hobnobbing with CXOs, networking is the need of the hour today. I think it just helps you to get that recognition and brand identity.
Amazing. So that's about it. We have this questions from Rafiq. He says, in hiring for CXOs, what is the ideal channel? Is it network search or job post? Like,
Sure. Thank you for the question, Rafi. I think by and large, what we try to do as such consultants to avoid low hanging fruits. Low hanging fruits, by definition, are the ones who constantly change jobs every 2 years or actively looking out for a job every year or 2 years. I think when you're basically looking at hiring a CXO, we kind of basically try to understand how is he perceived in the organizations that he's worked. What were the team speaking about him as an individual? What is a reference check of a board member in terms of his accomplishments, his achievements, etc. And I think once we understand and have that insight, it helps us to basically uh, see whether the candidate is good or bad for the organization. But in terms of the channel, I think we kind of randomly or very seldomly use job boards. It's largely through systematic research, through our networks, through our knowledge that we reach out to candidates. And just to give an example, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've kind of placed people at mid levels 20 years back. Today, they're my friends, they're managing directors and CEOs of organizations. So it's also the relationship that you build with an individual and you explore their networks as well.
That's amazing. And does ABC Consultant like have networking events where CXOs can join in, or those who want to get onto the table can be a part? Do you all have something of that sort, or any L&D that happens?
That's a very important aspect of a business. We do roundtables. At the same time, we have had fireside chats in the past, especially during the pandemic. And we continue to have CXOs being a part of our consulting arm, which is Amplify. So many a times, an organization like an MSME client would come to us and say that they would need a CEO for an interim period because they are going through some strategic milestones, or a CFO for that matter. So through our networks, through relationships that we've had for the last 50 years, depending on where the person is today in his work life, we introduce them to our clients to solve those business objectives as well.
That's amazing. That's great. And how do, like, if I want to attend your event or your roundtable, is there a way, or it's only like you have to be invited for it? Is there a way I can say, hey, I want to attend it?
Sure. I think our colleague who Suan was, who heads marketing for us, is doing a fantastic job. You can just subscribe to our handles on LinkedIn, on Twitter, etc. You'll have those invitations and those forms to be filled, and we'll be happy to have you in these events.
Amazing. That's great. Okay, so this question that I have, which is really important. So when it comes to hiring for CEOs, again, okay, what defines the ideal candidate? Okay, and so who's the first choice? They say sometimes it's the CMO who transitions to the CEO. Like, who's the first choice? And do you see a lot of CFOs, expressing a keen interest to be a CEO? And do they actually stand a chance? Can every CFO become a CEO? What is it?
Sure. I think that's a great question. In this last 5 years, especially, so, Chantel, I have seen many CFOs become CEOs, many CFOs become business heads, and then becoming CEOs of organizations, many CFOs heading countries as country managers or country heads, and then becoming global um, CEOs or MDs for that matter. I think traditionally we have seen CFOs not getting that opportunity like CEOs would do. And I think in the last 5 6 years in many organizations, depending on industry, the CEO role has got diminished. The CFO role has got enhanced. It's basically strategy and operations, if I would just broadly term it. From a strategy point of view, obviously you have the business blue sky thinking and build versus buy, and investors and Ps, etc. And from an operations point of view, many times I've been seeing HR, finance, IT reporting in to the CFO in many organizations. So it's become more strategic in a nutshell.
Okay, okay, that's amazing. And you see a lot of CFOs who are keen on taking up CEO roles. So they're currently a CFO at an organization, and now they want to transition to a CEO. You see that happening like, very often in the last couple of
Yes,
years.
in the last five, I think I have seen that happen a lot. Especially, I have made successful placements wherein the individual was a CFO, and I'm hired the organization as an MD of an organization. And I know one specific case where he was placed in 2015. Today, he's on the global board of directors. He's also the MD for Asia. So I
Wow.
won't take his name or the name of the organization due to confidential reasons, but that's a classic example that if you have the right traits, if you have the right competencies, nothing is going to stop you from getting that role. And it's also important, which I forgot to mention, that you're talking to the right search consultant
You
who
see the
understands these
potential.
traits.
who understand trades, and maybe you don't know that about yourself, but they are able to give you that confidence to you and the board of directors and create that bridge. That's important.
Absolutely. I think most of my interviews last for at least 1.5 hours. We don't look at it very transactionally, a check in the box approach. I think we look at future potential because we're investing in a relationship with a senior professional. And I think his career depends on our assessments. And we want to ensure that he's got a fruitful innings with the organization. So we cannot go wrong.
Okay. Whenever there's a hiring at a mid level or freshers, there's always like a 6 months probation. So is that the case also with CXOs? Do they have like a probation phase? How long do they take to actually, dive in and get ready onto that role? What's the hand holding process?
Sure. I think in most cases, when I look at CXO, there's no probation period per se because expectations are set from the very beginning. I'll just change the topic for a moment. I probably would say that traditionally CFOs, any CXO, when they look at changing a job, would kind of look at increase in compensation. They would look at a newer challenge. Today, I think compensation philosophy has tremendously changed. Today, our boards are mindful that we are doing away with the golden handcuffs that one would have initially, or the golden parachutes, as they would call it. Uh, Boards are mindful and that they have changed the way compensation is structured today. It's more on impact, it's more on business outcomes that you can create wealth for yourself. It's not the traditional approach of increase of fixed and variable, while variable is important in terms of performance, but I think it's more from a business objective achievement perspective that one gets to create wealth.
Okay, that's amazing. Um, would you want to add a little bit on, the new job description for CFOs and skills that are actually non-negotiable? Like if you want to elaborate on this. I know you took a little bit of it, but yeah.
Sure. I think the most important aspect for me when I'm looking at a CFO to start with at the very superficial level is gravitas and leadership presence. I think that's an important criteria because that comes in handy. How it's vital when you're working with investors, private equity funds, when you're dealing with regulators, at the same time with your clients, with the board, or with your teams. So gravitas and leadership presence is extremely important in my opinion, followed by excellent communication skills, confidence at a behavioral level. I think apart from that, you also have to start focusing on strategy and depending on the opportunity that you get in your current organization, especially. I think blue sky thinking is extremely important. Now, I do a lot of work in the tech world. So when you're trying to solve a business problem, what is basically going to be the impact that you're going to make by investing in a build solution? How that is going to fruitify? How is that going to help you end enterprise customers? That's a very big question. Versus buy. What is the meticulous approach that you have taken to list down the assets, and how have you basically shortlisted the right assets which will help catapult the business in terms of revenue and client growth? That's another important aspect that one has to keep in mind. So I think strategy basically comprises of how do you set up global subsidiaries, working with investors, working with private equity funds, fundraising, and at the same time your build versus buy strategy. That's extremely critical in today's day.
Okay, excellent. Swati has this question. She says, "What are the top 3 to 5 skill sets organizations are looking at when hiring for CFOs?" I think you just answered that one. But is it different for startups, in comparison to established organizations?
Right. I think broadly, I think I partially answer this question. If you're looking at established organizations, um, in my opinion, it's about how do you prepare yourself for the next business or financial milestone. Versus in a startup, I think it's about how do you move from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and so on and so forth. I think it's also very important that you have a pragmatic approach of using those funds, raising those funds very effectively, and at the same time uh, focusing on bottom line today, unlike how it was 7 8 years back where everybody was burning a lot of cash. So I think startups, the roles are more critical and more nimble, versus an established organization is about preparing for the future. So long story short, many a times I've seen the roles in startups are more operational and less on strategy, depending on the nature of the business, versus in enterprise organizations, large is a combination of high strategy and low operations, depending on the role and depending on the nature of business again.
Okay, that's amazing. We have another question from I don't know, the name is not showing. In order to get a CFO role, what should be the job hunt strategy? Should we be like aggressive and keep dropping our resume, or how do we look at consultants and reach out to them? How do we connect with them? That's one part, and there's
So,
also another part. Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
The only solution in my mind, if you're looking at getting a safer job, is network, network, and network. I think please avoid sending a mass mail to different headhunters and putting them in BCC and to yourself and sending a mail. That doesn't work. Please stop applying to job ads because it's more like a transaction in that case.
yeah.
I think having a meaningful discussion across the table over a cup of coffee, spending time to understand the history of the firm, the nuances of the role, and what the search consultant's background is. How successful has he been working for that client organization? How many placements has he had which have turned out to be successful? And similarly, why should you partner with that search consultant? That kind of would have a more strategic and more targeted result than not following those points. So I think, long story short, network as much as you can with such consultants, meet them, even though if it's an exploratory discussion, if there's no job in the offering, they will help you to prepare right from your resume. How do you start articulating your thoughts and preparing yourself, listing down the competencies that you bring to the table versus some competencies that you need to work on, and giving you direction in terms of where and how you could apply for roles irrespective of the industry.
Okay, so networking is key. Of course, that's
Yeah,
key. Okay, so in fact, we at the Finance Story are doing a lot of events. So we have an event coming up for AI, climate change in Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, and Dubai. So I'll invite those guys who are interested and I'll send you the details. Okay, so this is another add-on question that Rahul has. He says, which countries are open to hire Indian CAs or finance professionals for CFO roles? Would you?
sure. So most of my hiring takes place in India, and I seldomly hire for international locations. So my knowledge here is limited, but in my experience, what I can say is that many times your credits don't transfer to a country, especially a mature economy where you're looking at a full-time role, and you may want to complete a course or an MBA from that country before you take up a role. But if you're looking at emerging markets, I think it's widely acceptable, like especially if it's an Indian organization having a presence there, or directly from India applying to that organization, be the Middle East markets, South Asian markets, African markets, East Asia markets. I don't think I have seen a lot of challenge there in terms of translating your credits from India to those countries.
Okay. And do you see a lot of CFOs or CXOs in general looking at opportunities, in other countries? Do you see that coming across often where they ask you like, what do you think? Should I take up an opportunity, say in Dubai or Singapore or Malaysia? What's your take on it?
Sure. That's a great question. During the pandemic, I saw a lot of CFO friends take the golden pass and move to Dubai for taxation reasons. Traditionally, 20 years back, many CFOs wanted to leave the country for a good balance of pay versus lifestyle. But today, I think India is where the action is. I've seen so many people returning back to India today. They want to come back and contribute to India's growth. And I think I take pride also to add one point here that ABC Consultants was at the epicenter of building the nation through various objectives like Make in India, Invest India, etc. We basically set up the team for the country, which was responsible to bring in $562 billion, 562, $562 billion
Wow.
in foreign direct investment in the country. This entire team was set up by ABC Consultants since 2014, and this funding has come through 80 different countries across 62 different sectors under the leadership of Deepak Bagla, who has now moved on, but he was the person running this initiative on behalf of the finance minister's office. So I think clearly I see that India is where you need to be today. Here's where the action is.
So it's the right time to be in India. Would you want to add? We hear a lot of news and everywhere that hey, it's India's time. India is in its prime stage for the next 10 to 12 years. It's time to be in India. Would you want to add? Would you want to build up on this and share some more details? So we get a clearer idea why is it India's time? What's happening on ground? Because you're hiring for so many companies. How are companies shaping up? What's the impact of the economy on the industries you hire for, the companies you hire for? That would help.
Sure. I think there are certain events globally that have resulted in us getting this position. I think the first thing is the China plus one model. I think many companies are looking towards India in that sense. India contributes to a major population or major contribution towards technology-led solutions, be it in the area of tech product or tech services, or even for that matter, outsourcing and offshoring. Many organizations today are moving to India to set up their hub and spoke models because India, I think, brings a lot of scale. If you look at the number of engineers or chartered accountants or MBAs that pass out, I don't think any country can produce that volumes or that ability of knowledge and skill what we have today. So I think there has been a paradigm shift in terms of a lot of businesses being set up delivering value for global location, and also I think the consumption in India has significantly increased how it was 20 years or 30 years back. And because of consumption and increase in consumption, you have seen various industries catapult and grow, be it that you can see space, e-commerce space, consumer space, pharma space, so on and so forth.
Okay, that's really an excellent overview. Uh, I know we've addressed this in a question, but when you're hiring, say, for a CFO for a company that's backed by, say, a private equity or a VC backed, you know, so how will your search differ? And are you okay to consider, say, an FMCG candidate or from a large organization, from a startup?
Sure. I think, sorry if I'm not answering that question. There is no industry preference if I'm looking at the right skill set. I think what's important for us is that am I getting the right person to solve the business problem, irrespective of the industry? There would be biases in the search process, which the board members or the private equity fund would have. But our job as search consultants is to go beyond these biases and showcase to them what is the person bringing to the table. And many a times I've seen a change in the paradigm and companies hiring professionals, and they've resulted in uh, phenomenal success for those organizations. So if we would have not been able to advise our clients to look at somebody from a different industry, we would be recruiters and not consultants.
Yep, yep, absolutely, absolutely. Do you also see, Brian, a lot of say say controllers, okay, who want to move within the same organization to a CFO role? Do you see that internal growth happening, or companies are looking for CFOs or CXOs from outside? Is that how's that internal growth? And is there a shift compared to the last few years, and what we will see in 2024?
I think it's very important that you move into a business role. That's my first suggestion. Once you get to see the length and breadth, if the opportunity is given to you, that is, you're able to see it from a different lens perspective. Obviously, you're commercially strong as a financial controller. Uh, you have Hawkeye's view in terms of finances, and you look at a very pragmatic approach. But being in business really gives you a holistic approach from a client's perspective and from your delivery operations perspective. That makes your job easier to get into a strategic CFO role from where you are at this point in time.
Okay, so there's a lot of internal movements happening, like
I think,
organizations are.
sure, that's a great question. So I would probably not give you a direct answer, but I think the shift is happening more in the sense when I'm looking at multinational firms. I've seen third generation and second generation promoter led firms also these changes happening. The change is slightly lesser in first generation firms, promoter led firms, sorry.
Oh, that's amazing. What are the trends in CFO and CXO salaries? Like, how has there been a growth in terms of salary
This is
compensations?
a favorite question at any given point of time when it comes to a search consult. I think today, when I'm looking at CXO salaries, it's more in terms of what is the wealth creation one can make basis on meeting your business objectives. I have seen many friends of mine who are CXOs today who have bought, sea-facing houses, which they could never imagine to purchase through their fixed and variable salary. Just because of the wealth creation that they received, they've been able to purchase that in South Bombay. So the long story short is, I think if you're able to make impact, if you're able to take the organization from where it is by 5x over a period of time, I think you'll be able to garner a lot of wealth creation. I think traditional shared service centers still operate in the fixed and variable model, and there's incremental growth year on year. But I think that model also is seeing some change, um, which I've seen in the last 6 to 7 years.
Okay, that's great.
But to answer your question, if you're looking at what's the difference between a CFO salary and a CXO salary, let's say if a CEO is paid 100 rupees, A CFO today, a strategic CFO is paid 85 rupees, just to give you an answer.
Okay, not bad, right? It's improved. Okay, I'm sure the bridge will reduce, but it's kind of improved over the last few years because I was reading a couple of documents and white papers. There has been a significant improvement the way the board looks at the CFO, right? And so the CFO also has to look at him in a strategic manner with AI technology. They have to. What I've understood is that they have to improve the business. They have to create more business opportunities and unlock opportunities for the business. So that's great.
Correct.
Okay, so okay. This question is there's so much of like everybody, all these large organizations, be it the big fours or even the others, like even the mid-sized firms, they're looking at starting offshoring or GCCs in India. So what's your take on it? Because you were hiring for this segment in 2018 to 2021. Like I was just reading about Apex Fund. They were 500 and now they're 10,000 people in India, right? So that's in what, 3 years? So that's great. So what's your view on this?
Great. I just take a step back. I think uh, indirectly and directly, I've been associated with the outsourcing and offshoring industry since 2004. So it's 20 years now. And I've actually seen right from the early entrants, be it G, which then was Genpact, and then later Jenkins, and then later Genpact. I stand corrected there. How they have transformed the outsourcing industry to the very few first captives, be it likes like Red Suisse or JP Morgan that entered the country, to the ones that are recently going to be set up across different industries. There's been a whole sea change um, of newer demands and expectations from these parent organizations. So, very simply put, India was known as a destination for transaction based processing at the entry level, which was more in terms of listen, hear, and speak, which is the BPO, or finance and accounting processing, which is more in terms of order to cash, procure to pay, general ledger, travel and expense, etc., which was more rule based processing, which then translated to knowledge based processing eventually, wherein you had actuarial sitting in India taking stock and approving claims, etc. And today we are talking about generative AI, we're talking about AI based solutions, we're talking about advanced analytics. We're able to predict what a consumer is going to buy being in the US by just studying and observing behavioral patterns. So I think the industry has evolved drastically for the last 20 years. To come to your question in terms of setting up of shared services, I think it's all about value. uh, Earlier, the paradigm was how many employees does this organization have? I think with the advent of technology and automation, kind of making our jobs more effective and bringing in a lot of efficiency, the number is not going to be really the key, the number of employees, but what's the impact you're making in the overall business to the parent organization? That's going to be the key what organizations are looking at. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of R&D that happens in India today, which traditionally was not taking place.
Great. Okay, this is my last question. What are the emerging roles in 2024? What's the impact of AI, Gen AI, on the way CXOs will be hired, including CFOs, right? And what is ABC's plan for 2024? What are you expecting? What do you foresee?
Sure. So last part is a bit confidential. I cannot disclose that in an open forum like that. But
Okay.
I think we are pretty bullish in terms of the Indian markets. It's a very important year. It's election year for us, 2024. And ABC has continuously seen incremental growth through the year. We had a very good year for the last couple of years. We had a very good run, rather. So we continue to see that growth happening, and we have embarked on certain strategic objectives, which is helping us achieve those financial and business objectives. In terms of emerging roles in 2024, I think what I can clearly see is that I can probably see more strategic CFO roles that would be coming up. I can clearly see that we may kind of do away with the traditional COO role in many organizations because it gets more administrative after some point in time. And I'm seeing a lot of empowerment given by the boards to certain business heads. So the chief business officer role is going to evolve tremendously, is what I can clearly see. The chief revenue officer role is again going to be in great demand. And more importantly, the CHR role has got a lot of importance today, like unlike how it was 30 years back. Today, it's all about transformation, culture building, which is extremely critical for an organization's growth. So it's extremely important to get good CHROs and at the right price point as well. And need to stay relevant in today's tech world. A good CTO and a good CIO also is going to be extremely critical.
Cool, amazing. So I guess we've answered everything is answered. If you have, how does someone reach you? Like if they want to connect with you, how can they connect with you? LinkedIn. If they want to connect to
I think
Brian.
Sure. I think my coordinates and my email address and my phone number is mentioned on LinkedIn. I
Okay.
think the best way I would definitely want to have a conversation if it's not based in Mumbai, since I'm based in Mumbai, is through a Zoom conversation. Else, I would love to catch over a cup of coffee either in Nariman Point or BKC where our offices are.
Okay, amazing. So yes, everyone, thank you so much for joining in. It's like almost 50 minutes. Brian, thank you so much for the time and the insights. Very knowledgeable. I still have a lot of questions for you, but I guess it's time up. But yes, it was great catching up with you. Thank you so much for the time. Thanks a ton.
Thank you, Chantal. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining in. Thanks a lot. Take care. See you. Bye.